So I think, unlike in Asia, we're seeing slightly less flux between the behavioural types in Europe, and that one predominant persona hasn't yet emerged, I don't think. So it's safe to say that Europe is really looking at Asia with eagle eyes to see how consumers are responding over there. But to be honest, everything's still up for play. And, some markets like Italy and Germany and Spain, which are ahead of markets like the UK in terms of easing those lockdown restrictions, will be really interesting test beds for some of these emerging personas and how they will play out for brands. But, my point of view is that what's really clear is that these behavioural changes that we're seeing in Europe are really tied closely to the actions being taken by governments around lockdown restrictions. They're becoming triggers for behavioural change, and that's why they're in flux so much. So in terms of brands, I think that's something to bear in mind. The target audience that you are going after pre-COVID may not exist in their true form anymore. And so it's really important to keep looking at these changing behavioural insights and persona sets to get a sense of how you can best target these people. But just to cut it down a bit, there's two predominant behaviours that I think that we're really seeing here, which I think are not short-term and will last post-pandemic. The first is the way in which the worried withholders set, as Michael's explained, are really focused on self-fulfillment and are prioritising values over brands. And I think that the pandemic has been so life-affirming for so many people around the world, and it's really broken the strange cycle of work and home and shone a new light on rituals and routines. And I think, as human beings, we have an innate need for routines, and many of these would have taken place in the physical world up until now, and now they're being experienced virtually. And I think some would argue to great success. So this is a change, I think, that we'll continue to see in UK and Europe, and brands absolutely have a role to play here. Brands in Europe have a real chance to own some of these rituals in a really compelling and authentic way. And I think by doing so, they'll start to build deeper, more emotional connections with their consumers. So it's something to really think about. And finally, the second, I think, is that the rise of the cautious comeback personality type is fueling the rise of the health-conscious consumer. And these are people who will incorporate new stay-at-home habits into their daily new normal and use technology to facilitate that. And for these consumers, brands that have a health strategy will be a strategic differentiator for the foreseeable future. So even if your business isn't in the health sector, I personally believe that it will be mandatory in the same way that brands have adopted sustainable practices into their business fundamentals, because at some point consumers will be coming into your stores, they'll be handling your devices and experiencing your brand in physical ways. So how can you ensure that the safety nets are there from a health and safety standpoint? So the CPG brands, making sure that they're supporting healthy lifestyles for consumers, as shoppers and employees. Financial services brands, how are you ramping up contactless payments, not just as a convenience message, but as a health and safety message. And finally, if you're a technology brand, how are you using your labs and your R&D centers to innovate products that allow business as usual to resume with the required safety net?
We have created custom services to help companies and brands forecast the relevant role they will play with post-pandemic stakeholders. Used separately or as an integrated process, our services provide you with a reopening strategy, a custom brand positioning analysis, and a facilitated virtual workshop with our most senior discipline leaders to help you solve your most critical business and communication objectives.